You're watching Car Babble. I'm Ewan, and I'm sitting inside my BMW 3 Series, the 320d xDrive, and it's the previous F30 generation that I own. And I've had this car for just over a year, and as you can see from my channel, I've got a playlist about my ownership experience of this car, and I've been talking about all the good things about it and some of the bad. It's been mostly very positive, and I've kind of given the impression that I could see myself owning this car for a really long time, which in my world is more than a year. However, that might be about to change. Is it possible that I'm just doing that thing I quite often do where no car's ever quite good enough and I'm always just thinking about what car I can get next and trying to find a way to justify it? There's maybe a little bit of that, because this is technically a really great car. And on a summer's day on a country road, it's absolutely sublime. That's really where the problem is though, because there really hasn't been much of a summer this year in Scotland. We've had probably 2 months of dry roads, let alone sun. And the chances of me getting out to actually have a good blast have been pretty minimal. So most of the time I'm in this car, it's cruising about, taking the kids to football, going to work, commuting, whatever. And that's really where the problem is, because no matter how great the drivetrain is and the gearbox and all that, when it comes to comfort, this ain't the best car I've ever had. So there's a few reasons how I'm trying to justify it to myself about getting another car. One of them is, well, for my audience, it's always nice to keep changing my cars up and having a long-term owner review series about it. Great for you guys. So that's one. So it's kind of a business thing. But my wife pretty much said, look, you can change your car as much as you like as long as it doesn't cost us any more money just now. In fact, ideally saves us some money. That part could be difficult, but I do have some thoughts on ways I could justify that point and change my car. And then there's also the fact that we're thinking about getting a dog next year, and it's like, well, it would be quite good to actually have a bigger boot in both cars, just in case we have that, oh, who's going to take the dog and blah, 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 and all that sort of stuff. So there are some of the reasons that are making me try and tell myself I need to get another car. But I'm going to do another video where I talk about what cars I might be thinking about next, so keep an eye out for that. And I'm thinking about EVs potentially as well. But one problem is the arse of the used car market is literally just fallen out. And the value of this car has dropped by like 2 grand in the last few months. So that's going to hurt my equity prospects quite a bit, which really does limit what sort of car I potentially could trade it for, or what sort of deposit I might have and all that sort of stuff. So that's not ideal. But I don't really know if the value is going to come back up again. So I'm kind of like, do I get rid of it now before it drops more? I just don't know. So I'm just going to tell you some of my long-term impressions of owning this car, the good and some of the bad. But I want to caveat by saying these are my opinions and my preferences, and not necessarily slating this car to death. And because you get a lot of people out there that automatically dislike your video just because you say something bad about a car that they like. But some of my issues with this car potentially relate to specifically this car, so please bear that in mind as well. So I've said a lot of these things in previous videos, particularly the video where I took it over the Highlands and did a driving segment review. Check that one out. I love the driving experience of this car. It really is a fantastic car to take out on a country road, and if you get enough chances to do that, there's not much better cars out there for the money than this car. 17.5 grand I paid for this, and the blend of performance, economy and practicality is just so great in this car. You can still get your kids in the back, plenty of space back there. I mean, there's more spacious cars. The boot's in a decent enough size, but the whole powertrain side of things with this car is fantastic. It really is a great car in that regard. And then on top of that, the iDrive is really good. It's not my favorite system in the world. My old Volvo car, that had an even better system. A lot of people will laugh at that because it got a lot of stick, but I personally found it easier to use than iDrive. But iDrive is still very, very good. And the Harman Kardon upgraded sound system, these are the things that I've absolutely loved about this car. And I do worry that if I was to leave this car and have something else, I might then go, oh. But the comfort side of things is really where I'm comparing this to previous cars I've had, mostly Volvos, and there's no comparison. And that's when I'm like, oh, as great as all these things are on a country road, is that the thing that I'm actually going to need the most of all the time, or is it going to be really comfortable and maybe have a few more toys? And that's really where the problems start. Firstly, and most importantly, it's the seat comfort. And it's funny because it goes to show that car reviewers, their first impressions that they share in videos, including my own, are not always actually what their lasting impressions are. And I definitely kind of am backtracking a little bit on my thoughts on the seats in this car. I have previously said that I thought that they were more comfortable than the G20s, and I stand by that. But they're still really just not that great. And when I first got on them, I was like, oh yeah, these are pretty comfy. But over time, I'm like, no, they're not. But I'm comparing these to Volvo seats, and that's really not a particularly fair comparison because they're the best in the business. But for someone with a bad back and even worse posture, I kind of want a seat to help me with that. And I just find them they're not particularly soft. They're softer than the G20s, I think, but they're not particularly soft. And I just find it really hard to find a particularly comfortable position when I'm driving. The thigh extensions are not particularly long, albeit compared to my old Volvo, they actually have them. Volvo's ones didn't have them until the current generation came in. And I don't know, I just find it really hard to get that comfortable in them. And they sit really low down. I feel like I'm in a bit of a go-kart, and you've got lots of manual adjustment, but no lumbar support unless you bought it as a pack new or you find one as a used buy that has it. And it doesn't have it in this car. And I knew that when I bought it, so I can't really complain. But the no lumbar support's a real problem, and I had to put a aftermarket pillow in there instead. And I'm like, I really kind of grudge having to do that. Lumbar support should just be a standard feature in cars. And even now with BMWs, it's an option pack, it seems. So I really feel like that bothers me, but I just find the seats not all that comfortable. And from that point of view, that's the main thing, that and the steering wheel are the main touch points that need to be the best. And I will say the steering wheel, the touch points in a BMW are always better than any other car in my opinion. So that is an absolute win, but in terms of the seat, no. I knew when I bought this car it had 19-inch rims and M Sport suspension. It didn't have the adaptive suspension as an option, which you can get, and therefore that would have changed things a lot. But it's not something I thought was going to bother me that much, and I've definitely found on the days where I do get to have a blast, it's fantastic to have such a stiffly set up car. But as much as I do most of my driving on country roads, it's not in those circumstances. It's in traffic, with my kids in the back, you know, watching out for speed cameras, you know, commuting to work, and really you do notice the firm suspension more when you're going a little bit slower, but also when you're just cruising along. And certainly when you're driving along and you're just thinking about comfort, you notice those things more. And it is just a bit of a bumpy ride, and it's got run flats on it as well. You can change those too, but I didn't. And really, I just feel like the whole comfort factor is just not relaxing at all. And so in hindsight, when I do the majority of my traveling in those circumstances versus just going out to have a bit of fun, that's maybe the thing I should prioritize the most. I obviously bought this car as a used buy, and therefore I knew what toys it had and what toys it didn't have, and I've talked about those in previous videos. But certainly over time, certain things I haven't missed as much as I thought I would, and other things I have missed quite a lot. And again, comparing to Volvos, my beloved Volvos, there's definitely been a couple of things that they had that I really wish this car had, and I'm really kind of going, You could get Apple CarPlay wired later on in this car's life as an option. This car doesn't have it, and I don't even have an Apple phone, so that's that out the window. You could get it retrofitted, but for the amount of time I keep my cars, is it worth spending the time and money to retrofit something that might risk it having problems and could affect the resale value? I'm not really sure, positively or negatively. And then selling it anyway pretty soon after, I don't know. It's the sort of thing I'd maybe have done if I was definitely going to keep this car for a long time. But I do kind of miss not having Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which I have in my wife's Santa Fe. And barring the whole safety pause thing, which does my nut in, it is great to be able to actually see everything on Spotify and scroll about in it. Whereas in this, you know, you kind of have to set up a playlist before you set off and then just let it play and skip back and forth, and that's all you can do. Again, something that this car can have but doesn't is adaptive LED headlights. It's got high beam assist, but it doesn't work 100% of the time, which makes me kind of resistant to use it at all. And so I end up doing it manually, and I just find that a pain in the neck. And I hate to say it again, but my beloved Volvos have all had that technology work amazingly well. And I reviewed a car recently, another Volvo, which will be out on the channel soon, and it just had high beam assist, and it worked 100% of the time as well. So I do just feel like there's just things like that I notice don't work as well in this car as I have had in other cars, and I'm sure more modern BMWs that's probably less of an issue. And I don't have the adaptive LED headlights to be able to say how good that would work, but I do really miss that. It also doesn't have adaptive cruise control, and good luck finding that in most BMWs that are used buys, because it doesn't seem to be an option that many people seem to tick when they buy it, but it's a really great feature to have. And this has got cruise control and speed limiter, and it works obviously, but it's just not the same as adaptive cruise. And when I'm on my commute to work and I get on the dual carriageway, I just want to set that up and not think about my speed, and I can't do that. I do find the retro dials kind of cool when I'm having a racy drive, but I have started to think it makes the car look pretty old school and a little bit dated. And I knew when I bought it, this one didn't have the optional head-up display or the digital cockpit that you were able to get latterly. But I kind of now wish I had a digital speedo, because when I look at my speed sometimes, I'm still a bit like, oh, what speed am I doing? And it's just, it takes that split second longer to really know what your speed is. And yeah, so whatever car I get next, it's definitely got to have a digital speedo. So there's a few niggles I've got about this as a practical car for carrying my 4 and 7-year-old boys who are both still in child seats. The main thing is fitting an Isofix seat isn't particularly easy. There's no obvious little bit for Isofix points to go into, which is definitely more of a modern car thing, but you have to fit the bracket through the leather, and you could rip the leather putting it in, but getting out's an absolute pain in the neck, and I've used quite a few expletives a few times. But also the car's not that wide, and when you put your child seats in it, it kind of squishes against the side of the seat belt, and my eldest can get his own seat belt on okay, and his style of seat's a bit easier for that. But for my youngest, in our other car, it's like put your seatbelt on and he does it himself. But in this car, I have to do it for him because I really have to push it and angle it to get it in. And so it's just a little bit of a faff really. Connectivity isn't fantastic either, but it's a much older car, so I don't really criticize it too much for that. But overall, the back seat is not that amazing for my kids. So guys, you might think those are really petty reasons for wanting to change a car and think there's just too many good things about this car to be bothered by those. But yeah, if I was a normal guy and I wasn't one of these freaks that just wants a new car all the time and constantly obsessing about it, I would probably agree. But it's a great car, it really is. But yeah, from a comfort point of view, I'm not really sure if it's quite what I'm after, and maybe there's a better blend of what I'm after out there. But hey, I might end up keeping it for a bit longer, we'll see. But I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments. Please do leave me one, and if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe because I'm very close at the time of filming to hitting 1,000 subs. And also because I'm going to do an upcoming video talking about what car I might get next. I'm going to talk a lot about the rationale behind the different choices. Love to know your thoughts on that as well, because ultimately whatever I pick, I'll probably do a series about. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.